if you hear the testimonies, what they're saying is that now you've given us back the gift of sight. We're able to go back and tend and do our farming so that our children can go back to school. So these are the, this is how affordability is affecting our women. And also, when they're at home, they're able to contribute to the community, because if they farm well, like I'll give you an example where we're running a program with tea pickers, and where we screen the ladies, for example, we just gave them a pair of reading glasses and their productivity doubled the next day. So this is the impact of any affordability or any kind of care that we can give or have a program in place which would support women. And when you support women, of course, it goes out into the family, into the community, and into the economy. So that is how we see it as we, from where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for that. Let me come to Faith. As a woman in leadership in a parastatal, a state-owned entity, one of the key questions we normally receive is, we've seen so much affirmative action intervention from the government. What has this meant when it comes to equitable access to opportunities for you especially?
I think the crusade of the 70s and the 80s has borne fruit for us today. If it was not for that crusade, we would not all be sitting here. And I'm so glad today that one of the keynote speakers is Honorable Her Excellency Anne Waiguru, who she doesn't know, but she's my mentor, is here today as an epitome of that which has been a fruit of what other people suffered for. Julian, let me veer off a little bit. If it was a man by the name Mr. Madhai who was speaking about sustainable development and asking to save forest and the beautiful part of Nairobi, I keep asking myself this question: would he have been crucified the way Wangari Maathai was crucified? So as we speak about women in leadership, it is not a mean feat. It is one that is supposed to be a step or a ladder where we, the women in leadership or decision making, are supposed to reach out and ensure that the full fruits of affirmative action are exercised. And I will say this: it is actually having women in decision making position that has fast-tracked some of this affirmative action, some of this the equity that we are seeking in the gender. So I think if we continue to have more women in decision-making position, then we are going to quickly achieve all this that we are calling policies, that are still policies crystallized in paper and not actualized. Like, for instance, the 2/3. I had the president say it has to be made a reality. Sometimes you have actually to put the very women in that decision-making position to make it a reality. So for me, it is not in futility to have women in decision-making position in decision-making positions. Yeah.
Thank you, Faith, for that. I want us to get to the close of our conversation, and I want to ask one general question to all of us, and I'll start with Jackie. So when we put our poster out around this panel, one of the questions I received was, I hope you will speak to the needs of the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas, right? Around girls in that space. So let me start with Jackie. When you look at that crop of ladies, how fundamentally different are they from the ones you're interacting with 20 years ago? And what are you tailor-making for them? Very briefly.
Thank you for asking that. I have two daughters. One is 20 and the other one is much younger. And when I look at them, in terms of inclusion, They are living it. We did the journey. We are still looking for the fruits. They are living the fruits, and they're asking for what is beyond today. They're not thinking that it was like this 10 years ago. They're saying, here we are today. So let me give you a very complicated example. I did get my boys to start going out earlier than my girls, and they are just 1 year age difference. When my daughter said she was going out, I asked the boys to take her out. She's never forgiven me.
She's never forgiven you.
She said that they are of the same age group, but I felt that because my boys are men, they needed to watch over her. But when they went out, the boys were easy, but still watching my daughter on the corner. So the significant difference is that they have been brought up in this space where they are liberated and they're enjoying the fruits and they're asking for more. We have come from a space of suffering to get it, so we're a bit more lenient. But when you bring them to the workspace, they understand mental health. They will sit in a meeting and they will tell you, I sense some negativity and I'm thinking maybe I should take a 5 minutes break. That is unheard of in the days that my dad was a colonial teacher. But they do say that. And if you call them at 10 in the night and give them an assignment, they are going to do it until 5 o'clock and they're going to come to the office at midday and tell you, I was working through the night, I now feel better, do you have more work for me? If you're going to fire them for that, you're the one who's going to lose. So it's a different space. We have to be specially enabled to deal with this new generation. In terms of money, people say that the new generation talks about YOLO, they talk about all these things. They're financially savvy. And parents who know it are taking their children for financial fitness academies at the same age that she talked about. And banks are doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Gwen, your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, so we are fundamentally different. I think the difference between, like, I like the word she used, that we've struggled. And I think, and it's a good thing that Gen Z has been born into privilege because they're standing on the shoulders of those who went before them. I like the way my fellow panelist from Kenya Pipeline said that I think you were referring probably to Maendeleo Wanawake because that's where it began. I know that Gen Z doesn't know what that journey was about, Wangari Maathai, etc., etc. But I think in terms of what those differences look like, it is one, I think they are a lot more confident at a much younger age. They are a lot more exposed and therefore know a lot more. And perhaps that confidence can be tapered down with reality, right? But then there's also, I think, the reality of what my colleague here has mentioned, that I also find that they are that much more fragile than we were. And so when you think about ascension into senior roles in society, whether it's in the health sector, in the political sector, corporate community, etc., etc., I think for me, one of the things that I worry about is the idea that with Gen Z, we want to get there as quickly as possible with the perks that come with it as fast as they can. But I don't think that they acknowledge and they realize, and I hope that they do with experience, because we also learned that it comes with a lot of sacrifice. And as a woman, some of those sacrifices look like, if I am going to be a CEO, it means that I am going to sacrifice a lot to be able to do that. I will sacrifice time with my family. I will have mom guilt. I will not be there every time I want to be there. But also that I will probably have to work harder than my male colleagues, and I will have to go through biases that are incorrect and false narratives. So I'm constantly disproving that which I do not understand. So those sacrifices and that hard work and generating a tough skin over time is some of the things that I think we need to pass on to Gen Z as they think about what the future looks like.
Thank you, Gwen. Sally?
Yeah, I also have the privilege of having some Gen Z's children. And yes, both of you have mentioned that they are very different, fragile, all those things we've observed. But I venture a thought that because they have grown a little bit differently, they may not have as much cultural baggage as we all do. And therefore, they will probably progress the gender equity discussion and advancement much faster than maybe we have. They look at themselves and their counterparts, whether ladies or gentlemen, as equal, and therefore, and they believe that they can do, the same thing that the fellow man can do. So I am confident that in that space of inclusion and empowerment of the woman, they will make a great deal of progress. They said that they do not believe in hard work, but I also see that they venture into many other things than we did. We were all focusing to be engineers, doctors, lawyers, and accountants, but they're into art. They're into human activities, social justice. They will do something for the animals. And I think as an industry, we have to figure out how to support them as they venture into all these enterprises that are very, very different from what we have experienced. But yes, they've expanded the space for sure.
Thank you, Sally. Dr. Rizwana, you want to add something?
Thank you. I think three ladies before me have said it, but what I do agree with is that the Gen Zs, they tend to be very equal with each other. They tend to be very comfortable in that space. And I feel that even the boy child is accepting them in that way. So they come across much stronger. The only thing that I think about and worry about is when it comes to what they do with their lives, they're equal and they're at parity. But there is the difficult challenge of motherhood, the intuition of the family, and how do you balance that? So I think maybe just as I said that they have the curriculum, we need to start teaching them financials early, but I think we need to teach them what do you really want in life and the balance, because you could find you end up growing up too much later and then some things you feel you left out. So this would be, I think, a consideration that we would have to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Faith, as you pick the mic, we have 5 minutes to go, so I want to invite all of you to make your closing remarks. So start off, and as you give your closing thoughts.
I'll speak to the generation of Gen Z. They'll bring down the barriers, the societal, cultural barriers of tribalism. They'll break the glass ceilings where we feel there are particular opportunities which are meant for the girls and those meant for the boys. As for the excesses that we worry about as parents, nature has a way of checking those excesses. Yes, so that's what I have to say about the Gen Z.
And your closing thoughts? Just start from there.
My closing thoughts. As I prepared for this plenary today, I had a lot of reflection on the journey that we have made as a country and the globe. In as much as there's still so much to do, I got my inspiration from the Proverbs 31 woman. It might sound a bit primitive, but as I read that scripture today, I realized that it was in the making of God that a woman should be self-sustaining. The Proverbs 31 woman, she clothes in linen that is fine and purple. She does not eat the bread of idleness.
Amen.
She actually finds land and buys it. And to conclude,
Thank you, Faith.
And to conclude, she ensures that her trading is profitable. So for me,
Thank you.
so for me, my closing remarks, Dr. Julian, is to say that let us just not sit and wait as women. I think the strongest force on earth is the force of a woman who is determined to rise.
Thank
So
you.
rise, women,
Thank you,
rise,
Faith.
rise.
Thank you, Faith. Let's come to Jackie, a minute for your closing thoughts.
For me, I have two things. Number one, there's this perception that women are the worst enemies of each other, something like that.
Yeah.
But we had a lesson today on our webinar for International Women's Day at Workplace, and we were told that women have changed, and I believe they've changed. They will adjust for you the crown if it's crooked, and they will not tell the world that it was crooked. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Sally, your closing thoughts.
My closing thoughts are that we have made good progress, but we still have a lot to go. And there is one underserved, level that we haven't spoken about today, and we probably cannot exhaust. There are those marginalized women. There are the disempowered women, women who are facing gender-based violence, women who have all sorts of challenges that would need to be supported, and empowered for them to continue to live and achieve the aspirations that we have spoken about, that are the aspirations of a woman. There would be specific, we would have to come up with specific innovative solutions to address those women who are marginalized and who are disempowered. But we're making progress. The mere fact that we're having this conversation is good progress, and we should continue to push, and each one of us has a role to play to drive that conversation to its logical conclusion. Thanks.
Thank you, Sally. Dr. Rizwana, in a minute.
Yes. Thank you, Julian. I think we've had a very engaging time. And as I was preparing to come here, I remembered my days when I began 40 years ago. When I did a degree in computer science, it was a men's world. Not even 1% of the graduating class was women. And I think we've done an amazing progress in very many spheres. But as we have just heard, there are segments of society where we need to empower women, or we will need to create policies and processes for women who might have struggled to bring them up to speed with the rest, so that we can bring real gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Gwen, close it for us.
Okay. My closing remark to all women who are listening is, let's invest in ourselves. Invest in ourselves, invest in our growth, invest in making ourselves the best versions of who we are. We can't do that if we do not take the time to know who we are. The longest relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. So you can only know where you need to grow if you've spent time identifying that. In the spirit of what we are celebrating today, which is Inspire Inclusion, my closing remark along that line is, you cannot inspire if you're not inspired. So let's invest in that inspiration.
Thank you, Gwen, and let's appreciate my panelists for a very illuminating conversation, the noise notwithstanding. Are we live, by the way? Yes, thank you so much. It's been a delight being hosting this conversation where we have been focusing on ending the poverty cycle, formal financial inclusion, and any other nuances. I will be handing back to my colleague, Frida Mwaka, who will give us guidance then on how we proceed from here. Frida, over to you.
Asante sana. Mpigeni makofi jamani. You know, Julians, you actually asked the ladies what do they have to say about women. So what do you have to say, Julians, as a man who has availed himself?